In this video, I'll be going over week 6 discussion, but I'll be doing the second part, which is exercise 5.34, which is multiples of 2, and it says write an app that keeps displaying in the console window the powers of the integer 2. Okay, so the powers of 2. Display the console the powers of 2, and we're going to make that loop 40 times. Alright, so we will start with opening our Visual Studio, creating a console app with C#, and then we're going to go ahead. First, I'm going to put this note up here. Discussion, week 6, and this is exercise 5.34. And then we're going to go ahead and start with our using directive, which will be the same, using system. And then we're going to create a class, and I'll call this power of, oh my goodness, power of 2. And opening and closing brace. Okay. And then within our class, we're going to have the main method. And this will not be taking any parameters or anything. With an opening and closing curly brace. Oops. Within the main method, what we're going to do is we are going to first declare a variable to hold the value of the power of 2. So let's see, declare a variable to hold the value of the power of 2, or 2 to the second, or a number to the second power. And we are going to give it a starting value of 1, or initialize it with the value of 1. So we're going to say 1 to the second power is 2, and then 2 to the second power is 4, 4 to the second power is 16, and so on. So initialize with the value of 1, or start, give it a starting value, okay? Give it a starting value of 1, right? And then we are also going to use the long data type. And we're going to do this because it can hold larger values than the type of integer. Okay, and we can get this from section 5.14, and it says the different types that you can use. And so I know if you use the type of integer like we usually use, it's not going to display right. So we're using the type of long. So we are going to type the keyword long for using the data type of long, and we're going to declare a variable. So I'm going to name this power of 2 is the variable, and I'm going to assign it the value of 1. So we're using the data type of long. We're declaring a variable called power of 2, giving it the data type of long, and assigning it the value of 1. Now we're going to create a for loop with a counter variable. So if we look on in section 5.13, we see these operators and the expressions. So it says to increment by 1 but uses the original value is plus plus. So A being the original value. So we use the original value plus plus. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a for loop with a counter variable. So for loop, okay, first let's be a little bit more specific here. We want to give a counter variable, we'll call it I. Okay, so the value of I starts at 0. We're going to make sure it starts at 0, and we want it to increment by 1 after each iteration. But only until it reaches 40, because that's what it says in the exercise. It says we want it to loop 40 times. So once it reaches 40, we want it to stop. We only want it to reach 40 times, loop 40 times. Okay. So loop 40 times. That's what we're doing until it reaches 40, or we loop 40 times. So we are going to do for, oops, let's go back though. So this is a for loop. For, and then we're going to say, we're going to declare a variable that we're going to call I, but we're going to give it the type of integer. And then we're going to assign it the value of 0. So I starts at 0 and then increments by 1 after each iteration. So we're going to say then I, as long as I is less than 40, we want it to increment, we want I to increment by 1. So remember, that's the I plus plus. So we're using I because that is our variable. We've named it I for each iteration. So we've named it I. So I is going to go up by, it's going to increase by 1. So we're going to create this loop. It's going to there we go. Okay. So at some point we're going to have to multiply the power of 2 by 2. But for right now we're just going to increment. So we're going to increment by 1 after each iteration, or we're going to loop. We're going to continue the loop up to 40 times with a single iteration each time. Okay? All right, so now we're going to do for that, do this, right? So we're going to display the current power of 2 by calling the variable, which is a little bit different than how we've been doing it. So again, we're displaying it to the console, so we're going to do console.writeLine, and it already did it power of 2, but we could do it as an interpolated string and say power of 2. Okay, but we don't need to do that because we don't have a string. We're only calling on that variable, so we don't need to do that. All we have to do is type in the variable name, power of 2. So So this variable here that we've created, we're just calling it here on the right line. So now it's going to display on the console the power of 2. But we also want it to, multiply the power of 2 by 2 to get the next power. So we want to get the value of power of 2, and then we're going to multiply it by 2 to get the next power. So multiply it by itself to get the next power. So we're going to do this by, again, calling the variable power of 2, and we're going to assign it the value of multiplying it by 2. So we could write it as this: power of 2 equals power of 2 times 2. Okay, but this right here is saying the same thing. So this is saying we're going to multiply the power of 2 times 2, and we're assigning that as the value of power of 2. All right, so now we should see, if we test it here, we should see 40 iterations. Oh, it just says 1. Let's see, what did we not do correctly? Because we should see right here. This is where I messed up. Okay, so we don't need a semicolon here, because then it'll only read that line, and then it'll only display the one like we just saw. So we don't want a semicolon there because we want it to do this. Okay, so let's test it again. And now you can see there are 40 lines, or 40 iterations, and it gets all the way to this giant number down here. So if we were to use int instead of power of 2, int data type instead of long. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, so it goes to about, I don't know, whatever number this is here, until it starts to not read it correctly. So by using long instead of an integer, the data type of long, we can see all 40 iterations and it's displaying it correctly. So we can also get rid of, we can also do a console dot read line, an empty read line. That way it won't display all that stuff at the bottom. We have to press enter for it to display. So we can also add, press enter to close the program, but we don't need to. All right, so that's how you do this one. This is pretty simple. Again, this is for the discussion of week 6. This is the second part of it, exercise 5.34. So don't forget to save it and then share it within the discussion. I really hoped you guys could understand this and this helped.